All right, so last time I showed you this quiz that had every possible sample problem, and I showed you what it looked like from the student point of view by clicking on the preview button and actually taking the quiz. Now I'm going to go back and look at that same quiz, which I've retitled to a sample quiz with every problem type, and I'm going to look at it from the editing point of view, like how did I create that quiz? So if I click the edit button, it'll go into the view that you would see if you were, creating a new quiz or creating or editing an existing quiz. And the key thing is that look at the tab that says questions. So this basically is the tab that allows you to enter your new questions or load new questions. So when you first come into a quiz like this, there'll be no questions in it, and you'll have to. So at the bottom right now, there's a set of 3 buttons that says plus new question. So that's like if you're going to write a question from scratch, which I would suggest is a pretty good way to do it if you're new to Canvas quizzes. Is just create your new questions from within the quiz. Or if you have a question bank set up, you can click find questions and load it that way. I've never personally used this button that says new question group before, so I honestly can't tell you much about what that is. But those are the 2 ways. Is if you have existing questions, you can load them here, or if you're going to be creating new questions from scratch, you click here. So like, for example, if I click new question, it'll just by default add it to the bottom. And so what you do is there's basically 3 tabs at the top. There's one that allows you to name the question. Again, this is only for your own personal organization. So like, this is my new question. And then you choose what type of question you want it to be. So in the last video, I showed you what each of these questions is. And now I'm going to show you basically how to edit them. So the most basic and the default one is multiple choice. And you can set however many points you want this to be worth here. And then it's basically a what you see is what you get editor. So you'll see that it's got all the tools up here to type in what your question is. Choose the right option. Whatever that question is. For example, so one thing that I'll just address right away is how to deal with equations. So we're engineers, so equations probably come up fairly often. You can try and deal with some of that stuff using superscripts and subscripts, but I actually think this is very clunky. If you have any knowledge of LaTeX, then the best thing to do is actually use LaTeX. So like, for example, let's make this question about like, what is the integral of x squared? So if you were going to do that in LaTeX, you would just type it in as int 0. Just pretend like you're writing in LaTeX. From 0 to, 1 of x squared dx. And then you would want to turn, let's say, this section into a typeset equation. There's a handy dandy button up in the what you see is what you get editor that says insert math equation. So if you have LaTeX that's like set up in the text, you can just click that button and it will automatically try to convert it for you. I'm not quite sure. Sometimes it takes a second, or like you might have to tweak it a little bit, because it's basically what it does is it loads in what you typed as HTML and then it has to translate it to LaTeX. So sometimes like you'll see that there are like weird space characters and stuff that are in there that you might need to delete in order for it to typeset it. But usually it'll basically just render it. You'll see a preview of the rendering down here. So that would be like what it would put in. And then you just click insert equation and it'll insert it in line. So that's basically how you work with LaTeX in here. And obviously you can do more than one, whatever it is that you want to do. If although I don't personally use it this way, you can actually just click on even if you haven't inserted any LaTeX, you can click on this insert math button and you'll see that it gives you a sort of visual based editor up at the top that has a bunch of tabs on it. And so you can basically type in equations that way. You'll notice that there's this little button up here that says switch view to basic. and then switch view to advanced. If you're doing LaTeX, you should just always use the advanced view, because the advanced view is just a LaTeX editor. If you use the so-called basic view, I think that's basically where these what do you call it? Like these little things are that are up here. So like it looks visual while you're editing it. It's almost like that silly looking thing that's in Microsoft Word. I think that most serious people will want to use the basic view that is basically just the LaTeX source code. Right. Okay. And then you need to type in what the possible answers are, right? So that's our question. What is the integral of x squared over the interval from 0 to 1? And then basically there are all these possible answer slots down here. Now, just a couple of things about these. So right now there's 4 possible answers. They're all by default blank. If we didn't want to have 4 of them, there's a delete button here so that you can, over on the right hand side, so you can delete, so that you might only have 3 possible answers. So I can delete one, or I can add one so that I can have as many as I want. By default, you can directly type what the answer is. So like actually in this case, the answer is a number because it's a definite integral, right? So the answer, so this would be, I don't know, what is that? 1/3, I guess, is the answer. So like you could just type it in as like 1/3, and then provide some incorrect answers as well. And then now this part is really important. After you type in the question and the answer, you're gonna want to be tempted to hit the save button at the bottom of the page, but that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. You have to actually click this little button that says update question, because Canvas doesn't actually save the information about your question until you hit that update question button. Then if you're done, you can hit the save button. Or you can keep going and keep creating new questions. But it's very important to hit the update question button before you hit the save button, or else all the work on your questions will be lost. I've lost many personnel hours over this myself. It's a really annoying bug, but just be aware that that's the deal. Let's create the same question, but create... okay, what is the integral? But then let's do it as a definite integral so I can use LaTeX in the answers. You'll see that the input method's just a little bit different. It doesn't really require that in the way that it's doing it. Okay, and then we need to provide the answers. Now, you'll see that down here, there is no what you see is what you get editor by default. But that's where this little pencil mark over here to the right, that'll give you a more detailed view for creating answers. So like in this one, the correct answer, for example, would be frac x to the 3rd over 3, and then I would need to typeset. And then I would need to typeset that by clicking the insert math button again. And then you just click done, and then that becomes a possible answer. And then, basically you have to keep doing that, which is the annoying part. So like a pretty good trick is to actually cut and paste your answers to help save time when you create the new things. And then you can just highlight this and click the insert math equation again to get back in here. So create some kind of set of fake answers. And whatever, just keep doing that. I'll just delete this one so there's only 3. So now this is my question. What is the integral of x squared? And then I gave 3 possible choices. Now, in this case, the correct answer is the first one, but like, let's say that I had made the second response the correct one, then I would just click this arrow over here to tell it which one is the correct answer. You can also give, so this is an important bit of advice, you can actually give feedback to the students depending on how they answer the question. So you'll see that there's these little red and green boxes that are underneath the possible answers. And this is true for every type of Canvas problem. You can, so like for example, you can give them a comment based on, okay, so this was the correct answer. If they answer x to the 4 over 3, you can give them some kind of feedback, like about why they might have gotten that wrong. this is wrong because X. You basically just write some kind of explanation there. A lot of times what I'll do is, so you can actually create unique feedback for each possible response. And then, basically at the end of the quiz, if you're allowing your student to see the answers, they'll get some kind of feedback if you're letting them know whether you got things right or wrong. Similarly, there's one that's overall, like sort of an overall feedback that they get regardless down at the bottom. I like to use this, so there's a blue one over here that is a general answer comment. So no matter what the student answers, and without you telling them whether they got it right or wrong, they see some kind of feedback. So I will often, after the student finishes the question, write something like, this was the point of the problem. And to basically explain to the student what they were supposed to have encountered and learned from doing that problem. And so, basically you can create questions like that. Okay, so those are multiple choice. Let me delete these so that you can see them. And then you'll see that, so now I'll just scroll up and kind of show you what all these problems look like. So I already showed you how to do multiple choice problems. Embedding images is just about the same. The only difference is that you'll see that in the what you see is what you get editor, there's more than, obviously, like you can embed HTML tables, you can insert YouTube videos, you can insert hyperlinks, and you can embed images. So this, like in this problem, this was an image that I had created on my iPad by hand, then uploaded to Canvas. So like when you click the embed image button, you'll see that what comes up is basically an upload page. So you can either link to something that's already online, or in this case, what I was doing was I was uploading a file from my Canvas stuff. So if the file that you're looking for doesn't exist, you can just click the upload file button and find it somewhere on your computer. So the picture is actually this one, the Fin Learning Check picture, which in this case was a JPEG. By the way, it's a good idea to add, I'm not even sure, it might even be required these days, to add alternative text to your images if you put them up, in case somebody who is blind has to take your quiz. They will need some kind of description about what is in the problem. So obviously in engineering this is a little bit difficult to do, but it's a good idea to actually put some kind of descriptive thing in. And if you don't, Canvas will give you some snippy comment about how your quiz is not very accessible. So that's pretty much it. Okay, so I'll just click update question and it'll save it. Okay, so that's that. True and false questions are basically the same, as they're the same. It's just that there's the only possible answers are true and false. And again, you can give feedback depending on how the student answers. Fill in the blank question, or sorry, go back up. So multiple answers with checkboxes basically works the same way. So when you select multiple answers, you can type in your question, and then you can type in all the possible answers here, and then you basically just use the arrows to click. So in this case, there can be more than one correct answer, so you have to manually click on which ones are the correct answer. So the one that says possible answer is, I'll quote, wrong answer, and the correct answer is obviously the correct answer. And again, like there's a little editor button over here, so you can use LaTeX if you really want to. You can add as many as you want. Let's see, so that's the checkbox questions. The fill in the blank questions. So in this case, you actually have to create the blank yourself. So actually what I did was I wrote the question with a bunch of underscores here that was to some length, and then down here you provide what the answer is. So this is a question so it's a fill in the blank question. So the student actually has to type this in exactly to at least within the case structure. So like it doesn't account for capitalization, but other than that, it's got to type it in correctly. And there can be more than one answer, so you can add another answer if you wanted to, but most of the time there's only one answer. So fill in multiple blanks works a little bit differently. So actually, when you're doing the fill in multiple blanks, you'll see that there's a little description in the Canvas thing. It says, in the box below, every place you want to show an answer box, type a reference word with no spaces surrounded by brackets. So roses are blank, violets are blank. So you'll see that like here I have the word conductivity in brackets. So that's going to be the first blank. Diffusivity is in brackets. That's going to be my second blank. And then effusivity is, in brackets. So that's my third one. And then basically after you've identified what all the multiple blanks are, you have to go down to this drop box and actually specify what the correct answer for each one of those bracketed things is. So I've typed in, conductivity, diffusivity, and effusivity here. And again, you can, if they type in the correct answer, you can give them some feedback, or if they get the answer wrong, you can also give them some feedback, or you can just give them generalized feedback no matter what they do. Multiple dropdowns works pretty much identically. So in multiple dropdowns, you use a bracketed variable to define what the where the drop downs will occur in your question, and then the options. So for each one of those drop downs, so for each thing in bracket, you have to define both the correct answer and the incorrect answers, right? Because it's a drop down that is going to have more than just the correct answer in it. So basically, it's kind of like multiple choice, where you have to create a whole bunch of options for the student. You have to use this arrow on the left-hand side to click where the correct one is, and then you have to do that for each drop-down. So it is a little bit of a pain. Funny thing about this, like I don't know if this is a Canvas bug, but the drop-downs can't support LaTeX, so you can only these things don't have the edit button next to it, so this does not support equation type answers. It's really just for words. Let's see what else. So numerical answers. So numerical answers, basically you just write your question and you're expecting some kind of numerical answer, right? So I have written this question, I've inserted an image, using the embed image button, and then I have to provide it the exact answer. So, if I think so in this case, the exact answer is 3.8, and then you can provide a margin of error. So like with error margin 1, meaning that the answer could be as high, like this thing would mark the answer as correct if the response that the student types in is anywhere between 4.8 and 2.8, which I would say is pretty generous on my part in this case, but that's the deal. Now I will let you know about a little bug that's in Canvas right now, which is that when you create these problems, by default, it automatically accepts two answers. And one of the answers is always 0 for some reason. It's important to actually delete this. Otherwise, if the student types in 0, it'll be marked as correct. And that's the default. Some students, actually, I have talked to some smart students who know about this bug in Canvas. So be aware. Okay, so when you're done, click Update Question. So actually, I made that mistake when I created this Canvas quiz. I forgot to delete the 0. But that's the deal. And as I mentioned before, let me go back in here. Canvas cannot handle scientific notation, so you really have to try and make it so that whatever the expected answer is, it should be somewhere between the number 1,000. I think it'll accept up to like, I don't know how many digits it'll accept in terms of large numbers, but you can't type in, like if you type in scientific notation, it's just going to round it to something else. So like if I type in 1e6, actually it will handle 1e6, but what about like 1e12? Well, it'll handle 1e12 apparently, but 1e minus 6, no bueno. They're rounded to 0. So I guess for small numbers, it can't really handle scientific notation. So just be aware that if you have a small number, you're going to want to ask the student to answer in units that are corresponding to the small number. Okay, matching. So you go in. So after you select, the matching drop down, in the question type, you tell them some kind of instructions, and then on the left side you type one thing that you want them to match, and then the corresponding thing you want them to match it with. Again, this does not support, unfortunately, this kind of question doesn't support LaTeX, so you really have to keep the answer simple here. So this is kind of the maximum type of question you can do. Like you can see actually, here's a question where I would have liked to use LaTeX to embed a Greek variable, but I couldn't, so I just typed it in as alpha. Students will usually get it, but you don't want to do too many things that are annoying. You can actually add, although I didn't do it in this quiz, everything here has something to match it with. You can add what are called distractors. So you can add, I don't know, some, like, I think this would be the right-hand side. Like you can add incorrect answers that don't correspond to anything at all. See, where did that go? Yeah, matching. Those don't go with anything at all. And let's see. So essay response. So essay responses are, of course, easy to make because you just basically give the students some instruction and then the students are expected to type in the entire answer. So they're actually quite easy to make. They just take a while to grade. Let's see, fetch quests. So actually this is actually an essay question too. So the URL fetch quest is just an essay question where the response is supposed to be a URL. I believe you can do that as a file upload question, but I cannot remember. Yeah, anyway, let's not do that. So file upload, so those questions are easy to make as well. You just type in the instructions for what it is you want the student to upload, and then they upload it. So in these type of questions, you have extremely little options about like what type of file they can upload. That's different. So you have a lot. So for assignments, so not for quizzes, but for assignments, you can actually have a lot of control over the file extensions. But inside Canvas quizzes, you have no control over the file extensions. Formula questions are the hardest type. So this is the last one. These are the hardest type to create, in my opinion. So basically, the way it works is kind of similar to how the fill in multiple blanks works. There's a variable here that's in brackets, so I called it dt. So when the student sees this, whatever this is going to be randomly spawned with some kind of number. So in a fill in the blank question, anything in brackets will show up as a blank. In a formula question, this thing will be replaced with a random number. And you can drop in multiple random numbers if you want multiple variables to change when students see the problem. So basically that's used to create, like from the student's point of view, it looks like they're getting a different question than the other students because the numbers are being changed as they take it. So anyway, in this question, I'm changing the value of the temperature difference that's given in the problem, and then each student has sort of a unique problem that they have to solve in that case. So then you have to specify, but then the thing is you need to specify to Canvas what the answer is. So you have to type in a mathematical formula so that Canvas can figure out how to grade this thing. So the way it works is that down at the bottom, there's this variable definitions thing. So you have to first tell Canvas what is the range of possible values that it can fill in for that number that's up there. So in this case, I allowed a temperature difference of anywhere between 1 to 50 Kelvin, and it can change it to, like, this is basically how many decimal places it can go out to over here. So if I had 2 decimal places, it could provide a delta T that's anywhere, could be like 31.115. So that's a possible answer. 4 is a possible answer. Basically you can hit this example value button over here to kind of see what it's going to generate for the student. But I generally like round numbers. So then you have to tell, you have to tell Canvas what the answer is. So you have to type in a formula. So over here, I've already typed in a formula. So in this box that was down here, I had typed in square root of 5 times 0.001 times 2 times 200 times delta t times dt, and then I saved it. So Actually, I don't know if there's a way for me to copy that again. Well, whatever. I'm going to type in a wrong, or I'll just type it in again. So I'll just type in, I don't know, something, something, something. So this isn't actually the answer, so I'm going to delete this after I'm done. But and then I can save it, and basically that would be the answer if it uses this formula. So obviously the number one thing is here, you want to make sure you type in your formula correctly. Otherwise it messes things up. So note that I actually, so I have typed in multiple formulas now, and they're not the same formula. So actually Canvas down here tells you what it's going to do. It uses the last formula row to compute the final answer. So I'm not sure why it doesn't just delete the top one by default. Maybe that's because what I'm going to do here is delete this. But basically that's how it works. So I guess the one thing you're probably going to want to know right away is, well, how complicated can this formula be? So for that, there's actually like a little bit of a guide up at the top of these formula questions. So there's a thing that says need help. Yeah, click on that and it'll kind of give you an idea of what's available and how to use it. So the most important thing is like what functions are available here. So in addition to variables, so there's, the variables that you put in the problem statement, there are functions that are available by default. So like the natural log comes up a lot, or the absolute value. And you can kind of look in, oh, you can't actually see this whole screen. How am I going to do this? Well, I don't think you can actually see the whole screen here. But like, for example, there's stuff like square root and tangent, log 10, natural log, e as an exponential. So anyway, there's a decent number of things in here. Let me remind myself, can it do, well, actually, let me just do a quick test because I can't remember whether it can do powers. Okay, yeah, so it uses carets to do the power laws. So it can handle powers. So it can do basic equations. It just can't do super complicated things. All right, and then this thing is a little bit odd. So in terms of generating solutions, it doesn't actually generate them entirely randomly. It'll only generate a number that you specify is like how many different possibilities of the quiz it creates. So like if I say offer 5 possible value combinations, it'll create 5 different versions of the quiz that have different numbers that it gives to students. I don't know why it doesn't just do an infinite number since it's got a formula, but anyway, I didn't make this thing. Blame Canvas. Let's see. I think that's probably all you need to know about these formula questions. I think this is the kind of thing that requires some experimenting to do well. But just like the number one thing is that it's a little bit limited because you can only do formulas that appear like this. You're not going to be able to specify integrals and stuff. So it's got to have a pretty simple result in order for this to work. Oh yeah, one thing I had meant for this thing to be in Kelvin. So I'm going to put a Kelvin right there. And then I'm going to update my question. All right, so now you've seen how to create each type of Canvas quiz, and I think that you'll probably just have to, or every type of question, and you'll just have to experiment to find out what works for you. All right, so just one more thing. When you're done creating your quiz, basically all you need to do is click the publish button up here. So this is a quiz that I've already published, but by default, when you create a new quiz, it will be unpublished. So students won't even know that you have been editing it until you click the publish button, and then it will show up to them. It's a good idea before you click that publish button to actually preview it and take the quiz yourself and make sure that all the answers are what you think they're supposed to be and that everything's set up correctly, and make sure that correct answers are being shown when they're supposed to be or not shown when you don't want them to be. Just make sure that you preview your quizzes before you publish them. For the most part, as long as you haven't asked any file upload questions or essay questions, These things are self-grading, and the grades will just automatically show up into your gradebook after the students have taken them. If you gave a file upload question or a essay question, in my case, I have my notifications set up that Canvas actually sends me a little email to tell me that I have something that I need to go grade. Depending on how your notifications are set up, you may not get an email like that. You may just have to look at your quote to-do list in Canvas and then come to your grade book and actually give grades for those things. So just be aware of that. So that's pretty much all there is to it. So that's how you create a Canvas quiz for all the different types of problems.